All right, you just tuned into Random Radio. Welcome to another episode of Justask, the podcast where you ask the questions and we give you the answers. I'm your host, Nicholas John Random, and we are once again live at the Stimulus Cafe and Coffee House in Durango, Colorado. Today's question is going to be all about Social Security. Now, our question comes from Terry C. in Florida. Terry sends us a little message here. He says, he's only 35 years old, but he's heard his whole life that they're going to someday get rid of Social Security benefits for retirement. And his dad's at the age of retirement, and he's freaked out and worried that he's not going to get his benefits if he doesn't retire right now. But still, other people say that there's plenty of money in the Social Security. So he's asked if we could talk about Social Security Fund and what we know about it. Absolutely, Terry. This is one that people think about all the time, and it does get brought up a lot. And I have a feeling that a lot of people don't understand what's going on with the Social Security Fund. So I would be happy to do a podcast on it. All right. So where do we begin with this one? So let's see. So the Social Security Act, for those of you who don't know a whole lot about it, was designed to help retirees in the community who, they've reached the age of retirement, but they can't afford to live without some sort of help. And the idea is to help out those people who've worked most of their lives, for the system and paid their taxes and all their dues, and now they just need a little help in their retiring years. So the Social Security Act was officially signed into law by Franklin Roosevelt on August 14th in 1935. It didn't kick into gear until 1937. That was the first time taxes started to be taken out of people's paychecks and the first time anybody got any payments. It wasn't really kicked all the way into gear where people were getting monthly benefits until 1940. It's gone through the fund and the Social Security Act and the Benefits Act. The program has gone through changes, many changes over the year. Medicare started in 1965 and was added to the program. The law was changed a couple of times to include spouses and survivors. I think that happened in 1939. In 1956, the act was changed to include people with disabilities, and part of the fund goes to people who have disabilities and can't be part of the workforce. So it's gone through a number of changes. LBJ made changes to it. Nixon made changes to it. It's gone through a lot of changes over the years. But essentially the idea is that, if you work for a number of years and you retire at the retirement age, which has changed itself over the years as well. It was 62, then it went to 65. I think now it's 67. Then you can get retirement. You can get Social Security benefits, which is a paycheck that you get every month that's based off of the amount of income. It's a little biased because it's based off the amount of income you had been, like, on average over the last 40 years, what you had been working, like what your annual revenue was from your work. They take that, they average it out, and then they estimate what your payments are going to be. So what you're going to get per month. So in other words, if you work a job where you make $400,000 a year, you're going to get a lot bigger Social Security check once you retire than a guy who works a $40,000 job a year, which is a little bit biased, for a program that's designed to help people who are in retirement. It's a beneficiary program. It's just to help them. The point is if you were making $400,000 a year every year for 40 years, you should have had enough. You should have been able to save some money and put away some money for your retirement. A guy who works for 40 years on a salary of $40,000 a year is less likely to have the ability to have put away stuff. Those also, by the way, are high examples. There's plenty of people who work jobs that only make $25,000 a year. And when they retire, they get a lot less. So it's kind of a biased system. It's a little screwed up that way. The point is you work, you're eligible for retirement. You get a couple of benefits whenever you reach that age. If you stick around for a little longer, once you reach Social Security age, you stay till like 70 before you start taking your benefits. They'll give you even more money. It's just a benefit program for retirees. Now, I, like our friend Terry, have heard my entire life that there wasn't going to be by the time that I was at retirement age, there would be no Social Security fund for me. And I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea. It was very confusing. It's just something that's always been said to me. As an adult, I started researching it and looking into it. And the thing is it doesn't make sense. They still tell us that that's going to happen, that by the time that I'm at retirement age, that I won't have a Social Security benefit. And while it's probably going to be true, not for the reasons that people think, like realistically, there's a couple of decades before I'm at the age where I can retire. So odds are something, no offense to anybody or anything, but the world is a little crazy, and I have a feeling some horrible event will change drastically the way we live our worlds within the next 20 years. I'm just playing the odds here. So I don't think things like Social Security benefits are going to matter in 20 years. I think we'll be in a completely different kind of world the way things are going. But if everything stays the status quo, the reasons that they give for why we wouldn't have a Social Security fund any longer, I gotta be honest, they don't make sense. And I've done the research, and I'm a highly intelligent person. So they don't make sense. So here's the scenario with Social Security. So here's the deal. They take out of your paycheck, they take out 6.2% for Social Security. Out of each paycheck. Now your employer is also supposed to take out 6.2 and pay that him or herself for a combined total of a 12.4% tax. Now, if you're a self-employed person, for instance, like myself, I own a business. I pay the whole 12.4%, but I can claim the one half of it, the 6.2. I can deduct that from my taxes. By the way, a lot of people don't realize that if you're self-employed, you have a small business, and you're paying that 12.4 employee tax, you can deduct half of that as a payroll tax for yourself as an employee. You can deduct that 6.2%. The point is, 12.4% taxes are taken out. Now, the idea is theoretically, now this is all just a bunch of numbers, but the idea is for every dollar that you pay into the Social Security payroll tax, 85 cents is supposed to go towards the trust fund. That pays for the monthly benefits of current people who are retired and their surviving family members and blah, 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 blah. The other 15 cents goes to people with disabilities and their families. It's a good system. Honestly, the truth is, that number, that 6.2 number, was pretty high when they created it. Like, that was a pretty high gamble on their part as far as the mathematics go. This has created a trust fund with actually a huge amount of money in it. There's something like, I think currently in 2022, there's something like $2.9 trillion in the allocated fund. Now, it was changed a little bit when in the 60s, where the fund, because there's so much money in it and the government always needs money, the government basically has access to all that money, and they can take money from it and use it for their programs and stuff like that. But it is technically funded no matter what. Like, there's nothing, and people have argued about that too. They're like, well, are we not going to have it because the government's taking our money out and using it for their own things? Yes and no. So the truth is, like, yes, the government takes that money out because it's just trillions of dollars just sitting there, but they're required by law to pay up that money. Like, if we were ever to run out of money in the actual fund, they have to pay. They have to pay those benefits according to the written law. And the money that they actually loan, that they take out from the trust fund, it has base interest on it, which means that we actually, anytime the government takes money from the trust fund, we actually technically earn money on it, supposedly. Now, it just gets added to a big number calculator, and they record it and they say, oh, we owe you this much money or whatever. But this is where it gets a little tricky because, like I said, in the fund currently we have $2.9 trillion in allocated funds in this trust. But we should have more than that because the government has taken out loans and they owe us interest on those loans and the full amount of those loans. So we actually should have a little bit more money than that in there, but that's neither here nor there because the point is that's a ton of money. That's plenty of money to pay for retirement benefits. Now here's the part that doesn't make any sense. They have projected, the last couple of years, they've projected that the reason that you hear that all the time, like there won't be a Social Security, whenever you're retirement age, they projected, and they've been putting this out for years now, that by the year 2034, the trust fund will be depleted. And we won't have enough money to pay for the amount of benefits that are going to be there, which means that we will only have enough money to pay about 70, I think they said 78% of the benefits that are scheduled at that time. That's their mathematical theory, is that by the year 2034, we won't have enough, the amount of money coming in won't cover the amount of money that has to come out, and we'll only be able to pay maybe 78% of the benefits without some drastic change to the law, like an increase in tax or increasing the actual age of retirement or a number of these things. Now, here's the thing. This is what they tell everybody, but I'm just going to go over the actual facts for you real quick, just so that you can understand that what they're telling you doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense. Now, the logic that they give for saying we have 2.9, even if the government never paid us back the interest that they owe us on the loans, we have $2.9 trillion in that account. $2.9 trillion are in that account. That's a ton of money. And since the 80s, every single year, we have been putting in more money than we've been taking out. We've been putting in more, just enough money. Like they designed it very well with that 6.2 total percent. Like every year we've been 12.4% of taxes or whatever. Sorry. Every year we've been putting in just enough money to cover those events. Anything extra gets used in different government programs or whatever. But the point is, we have had since the 80s, we have had plenty of money to cover this fund. And their logic for saying that all of a sudden, 10 years from now, 12 years from now, whatever, it's 2022, they're saying by 2034, the fund will be completely depleted. Their logic is this. As of 2 years ago, 17% of the population was 65 and older, retirement age. And what they're saying is by the year 2060, it's estimated that will rise to 24% of the population. At the same time, because we're not having as many children as they did back then, no baby boomers, the working age population is getting slightly smaller, so that, like I said, right now we're at about 62% is the working age, and it's going to decrease to 57% by 2060. And they're saying that small percent, that's, by the way, in both scenarios, in the age of increase for retirees and in the decrease in the working age population, that's a 5% increase and decrease for both of those. 5%, that's 5%, just so everybody's catching that math. A total of 10% in difference. 10%, okay? And that's from right now, 2022, to 2062. You understand what I'm saying? That's 40 years. They're saying in a span of 40 years, their estimates, which, by the way, is bonkers. Who's taking 40-year estimates? Everything has changed in the last 10 years. And everything changed the 10 years before that, and the 10 years before that. Everything is constantly changing in our environment and our economy and everything. It's ridiculous to do a 40-year estimate of anything at all, let alone money. That's preposterous. But these guys are doing a 40-year estimate saying that the population of retirees is going to go up 5% in 40 years. 40 years from now, it'll be a 5% higher, and the population of working people will go down 5% in 40 years. This is the part where the math messes people up. Because of this tiny percent of change, which isn't supposed to actually, like, you don't get to that 5% number according to their terrible math until 2060, 40 years from now. But they're still saying because of this tiny fluctuation in change, by the year 2034, which is only 12 years away, not 40, 12, because of that tiny incremental change, we're supposed to be all of a sudden completely depleted to the point where there's no extra money in the fund anymore, and everybody's screwed because they're going to have to start lowering the benefits or taxing more people or whatever. That makes no sense. Like, whoever these guys were that did the math, did they just not think people were smart enough to do math? Because not only does it not make sense, first off, you're taking 40-year estimates and then saying that your 10-year estimates have something to do with those 40-year estimates, which make no sense whatsoever. Second, your 40-year estimates are only made so that you can have a bigger number like 5%, which is still a small number. And then you're saying that in the next 10 years is going to be affected so much that you won't have any money whatsoever. That makes no sense, and I hope you guys realize that. So, like, what they're telling you makes no sense. I can tell you that if you look, I'm going to put on a little, if you're watching YouTube, I'm going to put the graph on here right now. You can see how much money we have in the big giant line going way up. That's how much money we have and how much extra money we've been getting and putting into the system, because it was designed for, like, they take out a good chunk of your paycheck, and everybody gets pissed off about that, but they take a good chunk out of your paycheck. It's only going up and up and up. And the two lines that are really, really close together next to each other since this thing has been in place, that's the amount of money we make and how much we pay out. In other words, it evens itself out pretty damn good, and it has been for years and years and years. So the idea that they're saying that it's suddenly, all of a sudden going to drastically change in the next 10 years and we're going to lose $3 trillion makes no sense. Like, I don't understand what the purpose is of them telling people that. There are a few theories. There are people saying that over the years, a few times the government has tried to convince people that there's no money in the fund and that there will be no money in the fund, so we might as well just get rid of the darn thing. People have tried that several times over the years. They say we should just get rid of it. Let's just get rid of it. Mostly businesses, because they don't want to pay the tax. But the problem is we can't get rid of it. We have a system in place, and there's a huge, huge population of people who use that Social Security as their only form of money. Like, there's 65, 70, 80, 90-year-old people who they don't have any money. They can't work. They have no jobs, and this is their only money. And they earned it. They worked years and years and years to earn this Social Security. It was something they earned. And that's their only form of income anymore. So, yes, while it sucks to get taxes taken out of your paycheck, it does help the elderly and the retired. And I think that's fine. I think that's okay. So there's people out there, mostly rich business people, in my personal opinion, who want to get rid of Social Security. But there's also these theories abound that parts of the government have tried, and I've looked into it, and there is some evidence to support they've tried to swindle some laws into place to get rid of Social Security a couple of times in the past, where they sneakily, basically, they're just like, we're going to cancel Social Security. And then they don't explain what they mean by that. Because here's the thing, if they all of a sudden decide to cancel Social Security, what happens to that money? Because they never write it in the laws. What happens to that $3 trillion? Not including the owed money from the government in interest from the money they've borrowed from us. What happens to those trillions of dollars? They disappear. That's what happens. They go into the government and select funds, and we never find out what the heck happened to that money. So that wouldn't be good, but it is probable. We live in a terrible, terrible political world right now, and politicians can kind of get away with whatever they want to because there's so many crazy things to distract you with that politicians can do whatever they want. So is it possible that we won't have a Social Security because some policy is put into place where they decide to get rid of it or they decide to steal the money from us? Totally. I would believe that 100%. It's very, very possible that some sneaky business in Congress allows the Social Security trust to disappear. That wouldn't surprise me in the least bit. Does it make logical sense that the amount of money that's currently in the trust would not be enough to cover benefits, even in 10 years, even in 20 years? No. No, it doesn't. I've looked over the math 1,000 times, and no, by no means whatsoever does that make any sense at all. There should be plenty of money in the fund to continue to fund retirement and people with disabilities for a long, long time. So that argument has never made sense. It's just they throw a bunch of numbers at you, and unless you really and hope you don't pay attention, because unless you really do pay attention and get into the details and look at it, you don't realize that what they're telling you makes no sense. It doesn't. And finally, let's just say this. Let's say that they were right, and that for some reason those wackadoo numbers made sense for them, and that in 10 years we are at the point where we have to do something or we won't be able to pay benefits to people. So every time you research anything like this, which you always come up with is they're like, well, we'll have to increase the tax. It's already at 6.2 for employees and 6.2 for employers. We'll have to increase that tax. We'll have to tax you guys more money to pay for this. Or we'll have to do what we've done in the past, increase the actual age of retirement. Well, no offense, but 67 is a pretty good age for retirement. I know 67-year-old people who can't do nothing. Now, don't get me wrong. My grandpa was 98 years old, and he was climbing up trees and chopping down stuff with chainsaws and all sorts of crazy stuff. But it's completely relative to your body and what you can do. Some people have to retire early. I think 67 is a pretty decent retirement age. I think that's pretty average. So they don't, but that's one of the things they say is they'll have to increase the retirement age, or a combination of a couple of these different things. But the thing about it is our government's, just like any government, when it's in power long enough, it has a tendency to protect the rich and powerful. And there's very easy fixes for any program whatsoever. And when it comes to taxes, usually really blatant, easy things you can do to fix them that they just never want to point out, because then it points out how much they don't care about the lower and middle class and how much that they want the upper class, who is them, to save money. So if we get to that point in 10, 12 years or whatever, where our Social Security fund is miraculously drained and we don't have enough money to pay out the current benefits that everybody has, rather than increase the age of retirement to 70 or 75 or whatever, or start taxing people more and more money, there's really easy fixes. And the number one off the top of my head is get rid of the cap. So most people don't realize this, but Social Security has a limit. It has a limit of $147,000 each year. What that means is if you make more than $147,000 in a calendar year, in a fiscal year, you don't have to pay any more Social Security tax on top of that. That means the maximum amount in 2022, the maximum amount an employee could possibly have to pay in Social Security is about $9,100. That's the max, and it's capped. It's capped at that. Why is it capped? That's ridiculous. That makes no sense whatsoever. The only thing that does, and they always give you really, really dumb reasons, like, it would mean we would not be able to hire more people and this and that, and it would mess with the economy and all this kind of stuff. No, those are just words, and none of those things are true in any way, shape, or form. I can tell you what would happen is if you got rid of the cap or raised the cap to, $1 million. First off, the only people that's affecting are people making more than $150,000 a year, which are the wealthy. I'm sorry, but if you're making $150,000 a year or more, you're doing pretty darn good in life, and you can afford to pay a little bit more in taxes. And rather than say that somebody can't retire until they're 70 or 75 or 80 or whatever, or tax more of the people who already are only making $25,000 a year, barely surviving in this economy we live in. Just get rid of that cap so that the wealthy people have to pay the same thing. Because this is the thing. I'm not saying tax them more. Oh, tax them more. Tax those rich guys more money. No, this is where they try and trick you all the time. It's the same thing with anything when it comes to tax and wealthy people. We're not trying to say tax them more. I'm trying to say tax them the same thing that you tax the people who don't have money. A guy who's making $400,000 a year should be taxed at the same rate as a guy who's making $12,000 a year. That's what tax should be. It should be equal. Because if you don't do that, what ends up happening, what is currently happening, is you end up with wealthy people not having to pay as much in taxes, and you end up with the lower and middle class people getting screwed on taxes, essentially. Like, we have to pay so much more in taxes by percentage than the wealthy people do, simply because they put into law that there's these caps. That's ridiculous. So the very simple solution, if you ever want to talk to your congressman or anything like that, which doesn't really do you any good, but if the very quick, easy solution to fixing if there was a Social Security issue is get rid of or drastically increase that cap. There shouldn't be a cap at all, but rich people like to stay rich, so you're more likely to just have them increase the cap. That would solve that issue instantly. Because by the way, because it's more money and it's a higher percentage, like it's not a higher percentage, it's the same percentage, but the same percentage on more money means more money. It would solve the problem really, really quick because they make more money. In other words, more money goes into the system faster. Like, you have to have 12 poor people contributing to the same system as you could have one regular rich person contributing to the system to equal the same amount of money. You get my drift? Like, easy solutions. So the answer to your question, this wasn't a terribly long one, but the answer to your question is pretty simple. Should we have Social Security when we are at retirement age, according to the current system we have? Absolutely. There's plenty of money. There's plenty of money in the system. It is designed well so that there should be plenty enough money in the system. And unless there was some horrible event that killed off half the population of the workforce in the United States of America, which, cross your fingers that doesn't happen, but you never know, then the system's fine, and we should have plenty of money to take care of everything. Will it be there whenever you're at retirement age? I have no idea. Like I said, politics is crooked. They could easily get rid of it or try and steal that money. Who knows? And they will try and convince you forever that it's going to be gone because that's an easy way for them to do things like that, like sneakily take more money out of the Social Security fund or just take it entirely and get rid of it. I hope it's still there, or I hope we're in a world where we don't need money anymore. That would be great. Star Trek, come on, guys. Anybody ever watch Star Trek? The Federation doesn't use money. Everybody's allowed to go to school. Everybody's allowed to do what they want to do. It's totally different. We could get there if there wasn't all this politics in the way. Doesn't matter. Anyway, the point is, that's what we got, guys. That's what I know about the Social Security Trust Fund. I hope it's still there when you're at retirement age, and I hope there isn't anybody who decides to cancel it in the future. But that's going to be it for today. I'm your host, Nicholas John Random, once again, and we have been live at the Stimulus Cafe and Coffee House in beautiful Durango, Colorado. If you ever feel like coming in for a cup of coffee or a conversation, I might just be here. If you like our videos, click the like button down there at the bottom. If you want to support us a little bit, head over to our Patreon account, become a member. We'll give you some early access to videos and maybe some swag and stuff like that. If you got a question for me you want to ask, and remember, I do anything. You ask me any kind of question you want, and if it's interesting or good, then I will do my best to research it if I don't know about it already, and we'll do a podcast on it. I'm going to do hundreds and hundreds of these podcasts, guys. So we'll do all sorts of fun questions. But if you want to send me a question, send it over to random at cafestimulus.com. Our Patreon account is patreon.com/randomradio. And we'll catch you on the next episode of Just Ask, everybody. Have a good night.